the numbers of people coming to me having demons who were involved in serious, deep, non-Christian occult aspects of phenomena might have been 10%. Today is 75 or 80%. A demon doesn't go until it is made to go. The nature of a demon is implacable evil, stubbornness, and rebellion. They just don't walk away because their life gets a little uncomfortable. They're going to hang around as long as they feel there is an opportunity to somehow get grip on this person's life. So I make the assumption that in most cases, if there is some kind of entry point or evil or practice this person has done, a demon would have seized that. He's there. It's my job to root it out. I just keep asking. I keep pushing. I keep probing. I want to be as thorough as possible.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
All right, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. We're excited today. We have an in-house guest here. We're here with Bob Larson. Thank you so much for coming into our basement, 80s basement. I don't know if you have. This was our decade here in the 80s.
Yeah, yeah.
You're the real exorcist, they say, and we're going to dive into the. I think just get real into the weeds about the phenomenon. Demons in general is probably where we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about a lot today. So thank you for coming into to our basement, hanging out with us.
Thank you for inviting me to Tornadoes, LA.
We survived. It's like we're like Bill Paxton in Twister, R.I.P.
Is there some place I can dive if I have to real quick here?
Yeah.
Bob, we are in a basement.
We're in the basement.
We're in a basement.
You're safe here. You're safe here in
theory.
Yeah. But you have decades of experience. You've been doing this, thousands of interviews, thousands of experiences. And one thing we've been doing for the last 5 years is interviewing people from all over the place about their paranormal experiences, whether they've seen Bigfoot or they've seen a UFO or they've been abducted or they were a part of some ritual that they didn't understand. And so we can hit the ground running here. And we're always, every episode there's more questions, you know, we never seem to get the answers we're looking for, but for whatever reason, having these conversations really encourages people in their faith. A lot of people say that they didn't understand parts of the scripture and now they do. And I think interjecting some more harder, kind of more, I guess, rated R topics into their theology helps them put some of these pieces together. Oh, this is real. I'm in this war. I'm in this fight. There's a, you know, between king. There's a war between heaven and hell. We're kind of in the middle of that, and for whatever reason, that.
But the real question is, what are they going to do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can give them all that information, but if they don't have some type of a theological template or some basic understanding of what they're going to do with it,
yeah,
then they're stuck with it.
Yeah.
They're stuck with fear.
Yeah.
They're stuck with knowledge without a solution.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows that specifically are more entertainment. You know, let's just scare people, but we try to give better answers here. Like, what are the answers? If this stuff is in your house or in your home, or you think you are being oppressed by a spirit or something,
or possessed,
then what do you do? You know, who do you turn to? And there's a lot of debate of like the Catholic Church, you know, versus the Protestant Church. Like, who's got the better information, and how do we get this stuff out of our lives? And
well, you
and
know,
what
that's a battle that was fought viciously during the Reformation. In fact, most people don't know that the Reformation was to a large extent not about plenary indulgences and all the other things that people talk about. It was fought over exorcism.
Really?
The Calvinists don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that that is the history of the Reformation. Now it's true that when he posted the theses on the door in Wittenberg, Martin Luther did have these issues with the Roman Catholic Church. But what that then kicked off was a battle between who's right and who's wrong. It wasn't a theological battle, as most people would have you to believe. It was a spiritual battle of who can perform miracles, who can best deal with the supernatural. Well, the Protestants were new to that game. Catholics had already been doing it for, 1,500 years.
Yeah.
So they fought over what was a real exorcism, what was a true casting out of demons, what was a demon, how did you know if anybody had a demon? So these questions are really old questions.
Let's start there. What
Okay.
What is a demon? I mean, we've talked about that a lot, but from your perspective, after doing this for so long, what is a demon specifically?
A demon is simply, from a biblical and historic Christian standpoint, a fallen angel. An angel who rebelled with Lucifer in the original insurrection in heaven and was kicked out of heaven. The Bible says that a third of the angels fell or became demons and were consigned to a perpetual state of evil from which it is impossible for them ever to turn. Their moral state is fixed. It is evil beyond evil. And so then they came to dwell in the realm of the first heaven and earth, as we call it. And their job is, as Satan was described by Jesus in John 10:10, to kill, steal, and destroy. That's just that simple. They are not, as many people would have you to believe, and to me, that's a junk book, the Book of Enoch, but we could get into that later. Okay. They're not offspring of the Nephilim. They are not disincarnate beings of some other extraterrestrial realm. I mean, there's all these crazy theories out there. We're either going to believe historic Christianity, the Bible, or we aren't. And if we're going to go into other possibilities of explanations, that's fine. As for me, that's what they are. I don't need to get it any more complex than that.
Yeah.
Look, I have done, by God's grace, more than 50,000 documented exorcisms, more than any living person. If there was another order of being somewhere along the way in 100 different countries, I would have encountered it with consistency. I don't. The only people who claim to contact evil entities outside of the biblical definition are people who don't do exorcisms. Because in an exorcism, when you face real evil, and it's presented itself in what we call a manifesting form, with personality, with essence, with voice, with articulation, then you know what a demon is. It's no more complicated than that. What happens is that people in the paranormal, people in esoteric religious viewpoints, complicate the matter. And if you go into, whether it's the Necronomicon or whatever, you get all these categories of beings, and this is a lesser angel, and this is a greater one, and this is this, and this is that. The devil loves that obfuscation of complication.
So we've had a couple exorcists on the show, Catholic exorcists. So Father Dan Rehill and Father Carlos Martins from the Exorcist Files. And so you are not a Catholic. So I'm really excited to have you here because we've had that viewpoint, right? And
Sure.
as you've talked about, you really you set the table here because at the Reformation, Protestants went one way and the Catholic Church went another way. And the Catholic Church has, centuries of exorcism material and writings and sort of methodology. So how's it different in your line as a Protestant than we heard from our Catholic exorcists? Like what's the difference? Because they have a methodology that is, they read Latin, they read these prayers, they do things with holy water, they do these, they have this,
They have a whole school.
they have like It's what's the difference then from a deliverance minister, an exorcist in the Protestant space.
Say it. Say the word. Say the word, David.
If you're under spiritual attack, if you have a demon, it's because somebody committed a sin. You'd be amazed at some of the seemingly good, decent, godly people out of whom I've cast a spirit of murder. A lot of difference. So first of all, going back to our history lesson, they fought this battle, and finally, the Calvinists basically said, out of whom most Western traditions came, we're not going to fight this anymore. We're going to go another direction. And so they went in the direction of a predetermined election idea that souls were chosen by God, some to be saved and some not to be saved. So that put them in a position of saying, well, if you are the elect and the saved, and it was predetermined by God, God would not predetermine that anybody would have a demon. Therefore, demons are off limits to Christians. And they went down that road. The Catholics stayed right where they were. But the essential difference is that they have a more structured, methodical way of approaching it. And much of it I agree with. The Ritual Romanum, I have a copy of it. In fact, I wish I would have brought it with me. I have a 17th century edition of hand calligraphied Ritual Romanum. I've been to the Vatican. I've met with the man who was known as the Pope's exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, who was at that time the foremost exorcist in the world. And we spent a lot of time, many hours, talking about how I do what I do and how he does what he does. Essentially, it comes down to whether or not you're going to approach it from a more technical, methodical, ritualistic standpoint, or kind of a feel good as you go standpoint. And that particular school of thought, I'm really not part of it in Protestantism. I take a more Catholic approach, with the exception, I'm not reading from a book with a prescribed formula.
Okay.
And I'm not categorizing exorcisms into major or minor exorcisms. As a Protestant, I don't have to have a bishop's approval. I have God's approval. So I'm not part of the ecclesiastical structure. But when it comes down to the essence of what a demon is and how you expel it, that's where we converge. All right?
Yeah.
And the convergence is not just whether we're reading in Latin or speaking a prescribed formula. It's, this is a person, there's a demon, it's speaking, tells me who it is, how it got there. I tell it through Christ to leave. The only difference is a slight theological twist to it. The Catholic believes that authority comes from Christ through the church. I believe it comes directly from Christ.
Yeah.
Now, I can get a lot more complicated,
right?
But that's the essence of it.
Let me ask one thing about that too, because one of the things that was interesting about talking to these exorcists and the Catholic Church is that sometimes they would talk about exorcisms taking weeks and months. Is that something that you've experienced, or do you think that's not?
Of course.
Okay.
However, those are rare exceptions in my arena of exorcism. I believe that sometimes it takes longer in the Catholic tradition because of the formalistic way that they approach it. They don't get on with the job as quickly as I do, so to speak. and also, quite honestly, as knowledgeable as they are from a tradition standpoint, from a practical standpoint, updating to the world where we are, most Catholic exorcists are really up to speed. Notwithstanding, some are.
Right.
But the evil that we face today, the way in which it presents itself, is far different from 400 or 500 years ago when the Catholics were codifying their form of exorcism. In other words, for example, even I, 40 years ago, really even 30 years ago, the average person who would come to me with a demon is somebody who played with a Ouija board or somebody who was, reading the Satanic Bible or whatever. It's highly sophisticated today. And most Catholics, and certainly most Protestants, are just not prepared to deal with that. So the average person who comes to me, whether virtually, all day long, every day, 6-7 days a week, I'm talking to, 5+ people every single day, or meeting with them in person. So it's a huge volume of people from which I draw this evidentiary basis of conclusion. That is that if you roll the clock back to the 80s, the numbers of people coming to me having demons who were involved in serious, deep, non-Christian occult aspects of phenomena might have been 10%. Today is 75 or 80%.
Wow.
So the experimentation with demonic practices is proliferating both in quantities of available evil as well as the depth of immersion by which people get involved.
Well, and you're doing this every day, right? Like you said, 5 a day. Is it the internet? Is it availability or
Yes.
access? That's what we're seeing as opposed
It's
to
the internet and social media. People get a problem today. We used to go to their parish priest or their local Baptist pastor and say, I got a problem. Would you pray with me? They don't do that now.
Yeah.
They get online. And this stuff is, as with many products which are being marketed,
Yeah.
you give somebody a microphone and a ring light and they're an expert.
That's right.
And so they're telling people all this crazy stuff about what will solve their problem. And a lot of it is hucksterism, and it's a con job, and they get you in and they suck you in deeper, and they give you one thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. The average Christian, the average church-going Christian, doesn't know what they're getting into, because these people are very clever. They've changed their terminology from standard esotericism into things which are easily relatable. They talk about deliverance, casting out demons, being free from evil spirit. So they've adopted the nomenclature of the Christian world, but they have a very anti-Christian ideology.
Huh. And how do you tell the difference usually? I mean,
Well, that's the problem. The average person can't tell the difference. So these people who are really false teachers, as described in Scripture, they'll have crosses. They'll talk about God. They'll talk about Jesus. You'll see some Hindu guru get up and say, I'm going to do this in the name of Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about, but he knows that's the way he connects with people.
Yeah.
So how do they know? Well, first of all, if they don't know the Bible,
Yeah.
and most people are biblically illiterate,
Yeah.
the latest polls of Christian research groups show that 75% of Christians do not believe that Jesus Christ is the only way to God. All right? Well, they're fair game.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if they don't know their Bibles, if they don't have some basic understanding of Christian thinking and practice, well, they're going to be deceived. Here's the hook. The stuff that these people offer works.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah.
For a while. And it's the same story. I've heard it thousands of times. Okay, got into Reiki. Man, I felt good. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I felt this surge of energy, whatever. But then all my problems started coming back and I got worse.
Yeah.
I thought, man, maybe I just put on a pair of headphones and I listen to binaural beats. I'll be okay. And I did that for a while. And then somebody said, well, no. Kundalini yoga will really get your chakras aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have peace with God, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, there's this whole progression. Meanwhile, the person is going from a spiritual high to a physical and spiritual low, and they're on this roller coaster getting sucked deeper and deeper into the world of the occult.
Like a drug addict.
Very much like a drug, and you never get enough of it, and you always have to try another drug.
Well, it reminds me of like when you talk about like even tribal cultures, right? You have people go to the witch doctor and they'll get healed sometimes, right? There's power there, right?
Absolutely.
But to your point, I think it's such an important point. Like our society, we live in a society that consumes things in 30-second clips. They don't care to open their Bible. They're looking to who on Instagram or who on social media is going to tell them something that tickles their ears in 30 seconds, right? And they are illiterate. And then what we're getting is I see, and I'm sure you see it too, as you talk about, is this sort of overt whitewashing of witchcraft. Now they're mainstreaming reading books about spells to two teenage girls. And yet it's all been like, this is just fun and games, or it's self-help, right? It's this idea that it's going to somehow empower you or help you, right? And then I think your point is so potent. It's like it does for a time.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is the church history of what you're saying is that the church kind of split because a good portion of the church didn't even believe that.
Yeah,
they didn't think that there was any of this demonic stuff happening. People weren't actually being oppressed. What can you help outline what a demon can do to a Christian? If I have the Holy Spirit in me, what can it do to me versus somebody who doesn't have the Holy Spirit? And talk a little bit more about that.
Part of that is a discussion of terminology.
Yeah.
Words like oppression, harassment, enticement, possession, demonization, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of it is linguistic. I don't split hairs.
Yeah.
I actually use the term possession.
Okay.
Not because I believe that somebody with a demon is robotic and controlled in everything that they do, but in the sense that some part of their mind and emotions is possessed to the extent they are not totally a free moral agent to act out the behavior that they want. They can't. They're caught in a trap of some kind. So the challenge is language. How do you describe it? But when it comes right down to it, a demon's in you or he's not in you. And what is the certification that a demon's in you? He takes you over. He looks through your eyes. He says things you would not say. He knows things you don't know. And he tells that to the exorcist, which has to be known in order to completely rid a person from evil. So it's very common. I would say more than half of the cases that I deal with, the people had no clue as to why they had a demon. None whatsoever. But the demon, when I challenge it and say, so, okay, you're Jezebel, you're Beelzebub, you're Asmodeus. How did you get there? I command you by Jesus Christ, you tell me how you got there. Because there's always an initial entry. And he will say something like, oh, her great-grandfather murdered a man. I bring the person out of the state of demonization into a state of normalized human consciousness, and I say, you know anything about your great-grandfather? No, not really. Nobody really talked about him. You know, the one on your father's side, no. Did you know he murdered a man? What? What do you mean he murdered a man? The demon says he murdered a man. So I go back to the demon. get a few more facts. That then becomes the basis of the demonization, the path that led to the demonization. Now, to be clear, this is complicated. That's why I have to give you long answers.
Oh, that's
there
good.
is the initial entry point, the initial evil thing which was done, but then it reconnects in the person's life. They do something that opens the door to the ancient evil. Okay? So, great grandpa might have murdered somebody. That doesn't mean that demon's going to come down through the bloodline and attack you. It means he's lurking and waiting, and he knows he has opportunity. But you decide, I'm flying to Peru. I'm going to go on an ayahuasca trip.
Yeah. And you open the door.
Bingo.
That's it.
There you got it.
So it's like they're opportunists. They prey on vulnerable people just like humans prey on other vulnerable humans. Like
they are absolutely opportunistic. They get there because they have some kind of pathway to get there, but they will seize on something that the person is not aware of. Now, occasionally somebody will say to me, oh yeah, I know the moment. I felt that energy enter into me. I felt my mind going. I felt these throbbing sensations inside that something was taking me over.
Wow.
Bob, you've done 50,000 of these, right? For 40 plus years in this space. Like, what are the most common things? Do you see it in generational bloodlines, or what's the most common? If you had a Venn diagram, the sort of reasons or ways that people become. Get a demon, get impressed, get possessed, whatever the vernacular is. What do you see most commonly now? Maybe like as you said before, maybe previous to and now. What are the big things that people are?
Okay, good question. Let's talk about what's most common in history.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what is most common now.
Yeah.
Historically, if in the bloodline there is a predisposition toward that opportunity of Satan to seize upon, usually it's some form of egregious sexual sin, rape, incest, etc., or it's murder, violence, or it's some form of paganism or idolatry. Can be more, but those are some of the general things. All right. Then what are the general things that open the door to that? Because the person may not be aware of that family history of great-great-grandma down in the bayous who did voodoo.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. They are drawn by this power to do bad stuff. All right? If they are raised in a dysfunctional home where they're looking for love in all the wrong places, if they start smoking weed at a young age and then graduate to other things, they're being set up. There always is a point at which they go a step too far. That's what we always try to identify. What was the trigger point that finally caused, I call it the possession, call it the demonization, call it what you want, the demon enters. Now, at that point, if this is a Christian, the spirit of a Christian is not affected. And that's what confuses people. They still belong to Christ. The spirit is not affected. They have not denied their faith. They've just added something else over here that gives an entry point to the mind, because demons most generally dwell in the soul or the mind and the thinking of the emotions. It's satanic mind control.
Really?
It makes sense to me then why we're meant to die to ourselves to submit all to Christ, right? Because I think if most Christians are honest, it's like there are probably areas of your life that you still try to rule over. You don't submit.
Yeah.
Question, so why is the entry point a big part of this? Why identifying when it happened?
Very good.
To get it out? Why do we have to know how it got there?
Because it all boils down to legalities. Is there permission? Does the devil have that person's permission, possibly linked to past evil? But that person has to get permission in some kind of way. It could be one of these devilish deeds we've described. It could be giving in to hatred of somebody has wronged or abused them and becoming obsessed with that hate, anger, bitterness, whatever it is, something that dwells in their soul that they don't yield to Christ. I'm convinced there are a lot of demonically invaded, let's put it that way, people in a lot of churches who have a very minor possession that doesn't significantly affect their life because they're living so godly that that bad seed can't really spring up and do what it wants. All right? They still need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But it's not something they're going to recognize. But if their faith begins to weaken, they begin to compromise their values, then the devil lurks in the corner. 1 Peter 5:8, your adversary, the devil, is lurking, walking about, seeking whom he may devour. So he's just constantly encircling, going round and around. Do I have an opening? Do I have an opening? Now, people need not be paranoid.
Yeah.
They should not be worried if they're living a consistent Christian life.
Yeah.
Christians believe that each person's spirit is immortal, but not in an undetermined dislocation. Heaven or hell are the only biblical destinations. Thus, ancestor worship and veneration, these are not Christian options. There's some controversy surrounding 1 Samuel 28, when King Saul asked the witch of Endor to call up the spirit of the prophet Samuel. Whether or not it really was the deceased prophet, that's been debated endlessly. But here is what's not contested. That attempted conjuration cost Saul his kingdom and his life, as prophesied in 1 Samuel 28:19. It was declared that Saul and his sons would be killed the next day.
Let me ask that then. I think this is a question actually I was talking to my wife about recently. Was like, say you don't feel like you're having any issues like being demonized. We'll just leave it at that. Whatever it is. How does someone like that identify those places, perhaps in their bloodline or in their family history?
How do they know they have a bad ingredient?
Yeah, or like, how do you know your great grandfather was a master mason or whatever it is? Like, how do you? What's your process then, from your standpoint as an exorcist, to kind of figuring out those things? So closing those doors before they have the chance to be thrown open by a mistake. How do you? What's the practicum or what's the practical for doing that?
First of all, most people never stop to think about what they do know.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come to see me, first of all, they fill out a detailed intake form.
Yeah.
That intake form identifies a number of things. Family structure. Good family, dysfunctional family. Trauma. What significant things have jolted your life, if any, particularly if it's in the area of physical or emotional abuse or sexual abuse or some other type of trauma. The common answer that I get from people who start to do that inventory of what their life has really been like is that, oh, I got over that. I gave that to Jesus. I didn't think that was a big deal. Then I ask them a very pertinent question. Have you ever had therapy or counseling? No. Have you ever sat down for a long talk with your priest or pastor about your life and some of the difficult things you've been through? No. That's the standard answer.
Yeah.
Well, you're just assuming then
it's okay.
Your life is not infected by these things because you seem to be doing okay now. What happens is that catches up with them. They can kind of sail through their 20s. They start getting into their 30s, having families. Life gets more challenging. Get into their 40s, things start breaking down. That's when they push the panic button and say, is it me or the devil?
Mm. What do demons, to counter that, what do they not like? What are parts of the Christian faith and things that we do as humans that would repel them from us? Like when we if we speak love to people or we pray.
Yes.
Are these things or do they eventually want to leave that person or get away from that person when we practice more,
Well, that is a very crucial issue. And I have a saying, a demon doesn't go until it is made to go.
Mm.
The nature of a demon is implacable evil, stubbornness and rebellion. They just don't walk away because their life gets a little uncomfortable. They're going to hang around as long as they feel there is an opportunity to somehow get grip on this person's life.
Mm.
So I make the assumption that in most cases, if there is some kind of entry point or evil or practice this person has done, a demon would have seized that. He's there. It's my job to root it out. That's the difference between a good exorcist and a bad exorcist or deliverance minister.
Yeah.
The deliverance minister who's not so good at it and hasn't had so much experience will say some prayers and put the person on the road to happiness. But I don't do that. I just keep asking. I keep pushing. I keep probing. I want to be as thorough as possible. If you go to the doctor and you have what he detects is a systemic problem that's causing you a significant amount of pain, he usually doesn't just give you one test.
Right.
Yeah.
He says, that scan, I don't know. I want to get an MRI. I'm going to get an echo and I'm going to get a blood test and I'm going to get this. I mean, a good doctor will check a variety of systemic issues or things that relate to the general well-being as well as specific organs and look into it. Pastors don't do that. For one thing, pastors have been changed into glorified marketing and fundraising experts, and they've got to keep this machine moving because they're in constant competition.
They're CEOs. Yeah, a lot of them are CEOs.
They're CEOs.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's
in your practice, when you've done the intake form, you've identified the problem, you start to think what you know what it is. What does that look like then? What are you asking the demon? What's the process from there when you think I've identified it?
It's really simple. I look at it and I look at the person. All right, this woman was molested.
Mm.
She started living on the streets at 18. She had 3 abortions, worked in a strip club, and then got hooked on meth. By the way, that's not an extreme example. I mean, we live in a messed up world today, in case you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So I look at the person and I say, case in point, Jezebel, I know you're there. I may not see you now, but the evidence is here. You would not have passed up these 6 opportunities to get into the life of this fine woman who otherwise would not have turned out so disastrously. Now I commend you, by the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ, our risen Lord and Savior, you tell me how you got there. And I just sit and wait.
And they talk.
Eventually.
Well, you know, they're demons. So I say that, and the person's sitting there, and their feet start going up and down.
Yeah.
They start getting agitated, and they start looking around. You know, there's something's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I say, look at me. I want to see you. I demand, look at me. I command you by Christ. You look at me and tell me how you got there. That's sort of a simple way. But the point is, I challenge the spirit. I challenge the demon to come out and fight, because that's the only objective assurance I have when I tell it to go, that it's gone. Otherwise, it's guesswork.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people in deliverance mode, as they call it, will sit around and wait for God to tell them something.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he does and maybe he doesn't. And even if he does, what is your third-party verification?
Yeah.
You can't convict somebody of a crime simply because you think they did something. So I treat it as a jurisprudence process.
Legal.
It's a legal confrontation. Can I convict enough so that through Christ the demon can be removed?
So the language between you and the demon is like a legal language, like you're
It
in
is.
court. You're not like, hey, what's up? What have you been doing the last 1,000 years?
Yeah.
Jezebel. You know?
Well, that's a very good point, because there's some people who they get a demon, and their first few times they're like, oh, okay. And what were you doing during the flood, huh?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly.
No. Name, rank, serial number. You want to know the facts, nothing but the facts. Just get the facts. Now, they love to go off on tangents. Oh, come on. I've had so many Nephilim stories, you can't believe them. And I don't believe any of them.
What do they say?
Well, that's another topic.
Okay.
But I'll be happy to get into. But the point is, or so they'll try to take you down some trail. I got there through her Aunt Rosie. Really? And what did Aunt Rosie do? Oh, she practiced voodoo. I said to the person, did Aunt Rosie practice voodoo? Not that I know. When, where, time, place, how did she do it? Again.
You're trying to trap them.
Trap them. You're like arguing a case before the ultimate judge. Now, that may sound difficult. So, we have something we call Bob Larson University, which is a 60 course, 50 hours of video instruction on the entire range of theology related to this. It's the most complete online instructional format, giving you eschatology, ontology, epistemology, eschatology, demonology, archaeology. How do you bring that all together? So here's a key, and it's really simple. Get your DNA tested. Tells you a lot. What's your DNA? So what I've done in one of the departments of the university we have is to divide the world into 17 ethnocentric geographical locations, and what are the forms of witchcraft and occultism, etc., practiced in that particular group.
So do the Irish have a lot of problems? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, boy.
The Irish... I hope you're not Irish.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm Scottish, German, a little bit of Irish.
I'm a lot Irish.
You got a lot of problems.
Oh, well. My wife could tell you the same thing.
What did you do?
Now, let me tell you. Okay?
Interesting.
How many people are in Ireland? A couple of million.
Yeah.
How many Irish descendants are in America? 11% of the population.
No.
And that's just America. They dispersed all over the world. All right. So what is to be Irish? It's not to be lucky. is not to like alcohol, is to believe in witchcraft. The most virulent, serious form of witchcraft of the Western Hemisphere was practiced by the Druids who came over from Gaul. The Catholic Church, I've been to Ireland, I've been to Scotland, they're kind of the same. Came in and tried to.
They'll hate you for that.
They tried.
They don't claim each other at all.
They tried to stamp it out, and they did a pretty good job. But today, the dominant religion in Ireland is occultism.
Yeah. St. Patrick. We just celebrated St. Patrick's Day last month. And
he did a great job, and there were some other wonderful priests.
But they're all going back, right? Because that's interesting you say that, because like there's a huge push in Ireland. I have Irish friends to reinstate Gaelic as the language. So there's a lot of Irish people that won't speak English. But that has to do with, of course, like the occupation of the English, but it's also returning to the Irish roots. So you have, as you said, you have this return to pagan Ireland, and the Druids were the high priests of the pagans.
Irish people are great people. I don't mean to denigrate the Irish people. Let's just pick on the Germans because I'm half German.
You too.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What are the Germans noted for? They don't make love, they make war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that all goes back to the Nordic tribes. It goes back to Thor's hammer.
Yeah.
It goes back rape, pillage, kill the priests, burn the churches, destroy Christianity. That's what it goes back to. That's German.
Are the demons giving you this history? Are they helping you kind of piece together what actually happened historically? Because as you're working back through the evidence, you're going to hear things like there was a Thor, or there was this thing that happened that. So are you piecing together a more accurate version of his history?
Good question. I know this stuff from training, study, knowledge, and experience. Well, what's interesting is that sometimes the demons will give me a specific time and place where something happened. Something like, 1123 in the forests of Germany. They sacrificed their children and buried them. Really? What's the date? Give me the date. I've actually had that happen. I go back and I look, and there was some great battle or ritualistic event that took place on that date in history. Now, I can't always trace that, but I have on occasion traced it. I'm like, you just gave me this date out of nowhere? What?
Yeah.
And I was dealing on one occasion recently with a woman who had Spanish ancestry. And I said to the spirit, I said, all right, where did you get your power? It said, in northern Egypt. What happened? Well, one of her ancestors sailed the Mediterranean to Egypt, went to war against one of the African kingdoms, chopped off the head of the king and queen of the kingdom, brought it back to Spain as a gift to the queen. I said, that's it? Oh, there's more. I said, what? One of this woman's ancestors was the captain of a slave ship that then sailed from Spain and brought the slaves to America, and then impregnated someone in America, and the seed came down to this woman. So what have you got now? You got murder, violence, slavery, all this stuff brought together from Egypt to Spain to pre-Civil War America.
So just so I understand, you're saying that generational sin, iniquities, and all these things can weaken a person in the future, not necessarily legally give the demons rights to the person 5 generations down. It's just it's weakened that person so that they can pounce on that person easier. Is that what you're saying? Like,
I'm saying today genetic testing has learned to investigate how certain chromosomal markers carry certain diseases and a propensity towards certain sicknesses and illnesses. Right? It's genetically traceable. This is spiritually genetically traceable. And so what happens is, I don't know the process, but I've had demons say to me, you just don't understand. We can manipulate things down to the cellular level and even the atomic level. We know how to do this stuff. We know how to infect the bloodline in ways that will carry this evil. Now, I don't go any further than that because I don't want to get my evidence from demons. I hear what they say. Yeah. So the answer is yes. Now, so should everybody walk around? Oh, no. What's back there? Oh.
That's what I was going to say, Bob. It's like, I bet if anybody listening or ourselves go back far enough, you've got some ancestor who did something, he fought a battle in the 1100s and did something,
But I think he's setting up the framework of
But I'm
how
just
to
saying,
understand.
if we all have that, to some degree, or maybe we go far back now.
Okay, so the number one thing is, what are you doing with your life right now?
Right.
Yeah.
This is what,
Are you walking with God now? Are you being true to the Bible now? Are you in fellowship, in accountability, and in relationship with other good Christians? All right, that's the first thing I want to know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. Okay. Well, tell me now your family history. You may be doing okay. Did the rest of them do okay? So when people come to see me in person, I have a big whiteboard in a conference room where I pray with people. And I draw what sometimes I call the misery map of their life.
You're doing X's and O's. You're like a head coach here, Bob.
You would not believe this. Yes. It's like X and O's on the screen. And so I connect to this. And what's fascinating is the more I draw this diagram and so-and-so raped somebody and so-and-so killed somebody and so-and-so was a Freemason and blah, blah, blah. And then they start, oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I had an uncle who was a pedophile. Oh, yeah, let's put him up there too. It just goes on and on and on. And the next thing you know, the whole board is full of at least 3 or 4 knowable generations of evil. And I say to them, we're going to systematically go through that. The sin is forgiven as far as you are concerned. But the infection of evil needs to be eradicated. So we're going to go through and you're going to renounce every single one of those evil deeds of the ones that you do know.
Yeah.
Here's what happens. Sometimes they sail right through it. And I say, great. But as they start to go through it, they get agitated. They get nervous. And sometimes a voice will speak out of the body and say, I'm not letting them renounce that.
Really?
So I don't want this to sound complicated. It is a bit complicated. But the devil's had many, many millennia to build a system of evil to entrap people. He's the second most intelligent being in the universe. All right? And we know that in an instant, Christ can smash that, can destroy it, and release that person. And that's what frustrates them. But you have to get them to that point where they put their trust in Christ to the extent that they're willing to let go of everything in their life that could be a connection to that evil.
So do the demons legally have to tell you the truth, or do they lie as well?
They love going down rabbit trails, as
so they
call
distract.
them. Oh, yeah.
But can they lie specifically?
Yes. I had one a couple of days ago. Took me on a 30-minute rabbit trail down here, down there, here, there, everywhere. And finally I said, this is a bunch of lies, isn't it? The last half hour has been absolutely wasted. He said, yeah. Wow. I just thought I'd see if you'd believe it. Well, I didn't believe it. Yeah. I just followed it. But there's a point at which it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. The devil is very logical in what he does, very intentional in what he does. He's not random.
Well,
he doesn't just walk into a bar and say, I think I'll get him.
Well, humans rarely will tell another human, I'm lying to you right now. But demons, you can get them to a place where they'll say, yeah, I'm lying.
Well, you can say to them, I command you,
okay,
through the power of Christ, lie not to the Holy Spirit, you will suffer judgment.
Okay.
If I get to, and sometimes they say, no, I'm telling the truth. I say, all right. I ask the Lord to send angels to strike you with judgment. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
So you have to get them into a place where they
but
will tell the truth.
Most demons tell the truth most of the time. That's the irony of it. And the reason is they are so proud of what they've done. They gloat. They think you are not going to get rid of them. They think they're going to keep tormenting this person. And their pride is their downfall.
Mm.
Sometimes I say demons say the dumbest things. It's like, that's what sin does. That's what evil does. You know, these videos of these criminals who go into a bank to rob a bank. They ask for identification. The guy takes out his driver's license. Yeah, that's demons. That's demons sometimes.
Well, it reminds me of like the story of Jesus with the man of the tombs, right? Where their response is like, Son of Man, why are you here before your appointed time, before our appointed time of judgment? They're like literally saying like, you are who you are. Why are you here? Which is a very truthful thing to say. They're not, it's.
That man, in Luke 1, he had been coming to the synagogue. We don't know how long. Acting like a good, godly Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they want to blow their cover?
Yeah.
Pride. They had to challenge Christ. So that's also the nature of evil. It's clever. It's cunning.
Yeah.
It's like the dumb things criminals do.
But the pride makes them want to tell the truth because they want to take credit for what they've done.
They do want to take credit for it.
Yeah.
They're proud of it.
So it's like, oh, you see this robbery that went down, this heist, the biggest heist of all time? Yeah, that was me.
Exactly.
That was me. Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, you can't get rid of me. I just told you everything I've done. I've been here for 1,000 years. You can't possibly make me go.
Like honor among thieves, right? Yeah.
Well, they tell on each other. That's another point.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll be getting ready to cast out Lucifer in somebody, and he'll jump in and say, you make Beelzebub go too. If I go, he goes.
So that's how you've learned the names of these things, Jezebel, Beelzebub, because they tell on each other?
Well, no, I want to know. I go for the name. Now, sometimes the name is obvious. Jezebel's an obvious one. Murder's an obvious one. Death is an obvious one. Somebody comes to me, and I've seen this many times. I've been in 6 major car accidents. And on top of that, I've had 4 major surgeries for whatever. Sounds to me like you have a spirit of death trying to kill you. Okay. But you always want to go after the name because the name tells you what the motif of this person's life is like. What's the real problem Satan is exploiting? The name tells you that. If he says spirit of murder and this person hasn't murdered somebody, then somebody's murdered somebody.
Okay.
If he says, I'm Antichrist, I say, well, this person has faith in God. Who in their family didn't? Oh, she had an uncle who was an atheist, okay? The name is crucial because the name tells you what it does and who it is.
Does the spirit of Jezebel go all the way back to the actual Jezebel, or is it just the character trait of Jezebel?
Both and beyond.
Okay.
Because before there was Jezebel, there were other prototypes of that kind of lust, licentiousness, power, control. And so now let's go back to Isis. Let's go back to Aphrodite.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to all these ancient goddesses, Artemis and so on. Well, they are like pre-Jezebel prototypes leading to Lilith, who was the first Jezebel, so to speak.
Wow.
Lilith is the spirit coming from Jewish occult mysticism who believed that she was the rightful heir and should bear the human race. So she was an heir to the promise that they would conceive, etc., and so on. And so she believes and teach that the spirit of Lilith, and Satanism, they use that spirit, that Eve sexually seduced Adam, that Lilith was the true wife, and the Bible has it backwards. So the usurper is Eve, the true mother of humanity was Lilith. So it's this spirit of rebellion against the will and purpose of God from the Garden of Eden onward. So Lilith comes down, manifests what we call the Jezebel spirit in these various prototypes of goddess worship, Medusa, Medea, whoever throughout history, culminating in the ultimate example of that, Jezebel and her daughter Athaliah. So then now forward, the spirits generally claim their heritage is Jezebel.
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask, like, you know, these spirits take on names they think have power, and that's their characteristic. Because there's like not, you know, are there many Lucifers? Are there many Jezebels? There's not singular, right?
Billions.
Right. That's what I was going to ask. The second thing I was going to say is like just that narrative of Lilith is one that you hear more and more now about, which is this sort of esoteric, you know, it's Kabbalah, it's all this fabrication, this blasphemy to sort of say the Bible's wrong, right? But this spirit though existed at the time.
You remember, you know where they started in pop culture? Back in the 80s, Lilith Fest. You guys may be too young to remember that.
We're in the basement, Bob.
This
we like the 80s, though.
Female empowerment, all these rock and folk artists all got together and were holding Lilith Fest.
Jeez.
Until then, most people had never, ever heard that name. And in fact, when I first started, maybe 40 years ago, casting out the Lilith spirit, I never heard anybody in deliverance ever speak of it. Now they all talk about it. Well, that's good. They just finally figured out something that's always been there.
So, for like practical terms, there's a UFC fight. You got Lilith on one side and Jezebel on the other. Who wins? And does it work like that?
They hate each other. Hate each other.
But Lilith can beat Jezebel.
Lucifer hates Lilith. He hates Jezebel even more.
Wow.
It's a pride issue.
Yeah, they want to be the top dog, right?
Everybody.
Yeah. I want to ask a macro question,
That's
Bob.
Wild.
In your mind, why is deliverance, the idea of deliverance and exorcism, a fringe topic now? When early in the church, and even at the time of Jesus, this was a core principle of this is what Christ did. He was an exorcist, right? He went and exorcised demons. The early church did a ton of this. Like, why do you think at this point in time it feels like it's pushed to the fringe? It's sort of like an outlier when it comes
like
to
a materialist worldview, to
the church. It's not a practice that most pastors aren't. Not that this is a broad brush, because I know a lot of pastors that do this, but most pastors are not casting out demons.
I'll give you a couple of reasons. For one reason, it's tough work and it's time intensive, and the average pastor simply sees it as a problem he doesn't want to have to deal with because it'll suck up a lot of his time.
Yeah, you're like a lawyer in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I understand that.
a hard job.
I understand he's got, as we said, we've turned pastors into glorified CEOs. They've got all these responsibilities and so on. And now you want me to do this too? No, thanks. Okay, but why don't you form teams of people in your church who will be dedicated to this mission and pray for these kinds of people and at least have an outlet?
Mm.
And then they're worried about the second problem. They'll say it always gets weird, and they're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Weird people get attracted to this kind of ministry. Yeah.
Why?
Like weird talk show host. No,
Hey.
Yeah. You guys, well, okay.
No, I would say this too.
You're not weird because you deal with weird stuff.
But Bob, I would say this too, that like I think that there's a portion of the Christian church too that doesn't believe that Christians can have a demon
or even be influenced by a demon.
Yes.
A demon can do nothing to you.
Right.
Yeah, I want to ask some questions about that.
Yeah, they think it diminishes the power of the cross and Christ.
Yep, I've heard that.
So their solution is pray more, give more, believe more. Okay? And people come to me and say, I've done all that. I remember one lady, she said, I go to church 6 times a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The door's open, I'm there.
Well,
why is my problem not fixed? Okay. Well, that's performance Christianity. Not that she was totally insincere, but she was doing that she might be.
Well, when you ask her that question, have you gone to counseling? Have you actually done a second level of work on this? No, I can't do that.
She hasn't.
Yeah.
She hasn't personally probed her own issues. Common question I ask people. They'll sit down with me for 15, 20 minutes. I pepper them with these kind of questions.
Yeah.
And then I just look at them and say, I'm guessing this is the most thorough conversation you've ever had about your spiritual life and your family and what you've been through. And the answer is always yes. They've never been to a counselor or a therapist or anybody who could objectify the information about their life and say, I think you have a problem here. And whether they solve it, they identify a problem. Worse yet, no pastor has taken the time. No priest has taken the time. Now, again, I'm picking on pastors because I do understand they can't get bogged down in this type of thing because you have a conversation like this with somebody and you open a can of worms and you're there for 2 hours talking about it. And you can't walk away from it.
Yeah.
So the church faces a challenge, but the church has faced many challenges for which many ministries and many nonprofits have sprung up by the thousands to address all these areas. And still, deliverance is a drop in the bucket. Now, when I started out on YouTube, for the first 10 years I was on YouTube, I was the only person showing the casting out of demons. But now I've got hundreds of imitators, all kinds of people showing it out there, some for better, some for worse. But even that is that much of a spectrum of Christianity.
Mm.
And then, to make matters worse, they attack the Catholics. And I'm like, well, at least they're doing it.
Yeah.
You may not want to do it the way they're doing it, but they believe it. They believe it, and they're doing something about it.
Yeah.
So let's give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, it's like taking your car to the dealer and then arguing at the dude at the shop, the corner market. That's like, fixing cars. It's like, wait, no, you have to take it to the dealer, and it's interesting how we sort of get into these. I have some questions, a couple questions. So from my understanding, you're saying that the spirit is safe with Christ and the mind is usually the place where they are attacked the most. And that's the vulnerable place. And as a human being, we are a body, soul, spirit. We're multiple parts here, but the spirit is safe. And there's this ancient debate that even if your soul is with Christ, you're not susceptible to demonic influence, attack, or anything. But it seems like when you encounter somebody who seems like they have a spirit on them, but they're confessing Christian. I mean, we see some of the most manipulative people are Christians, and there's just like a sense. I mean, doing this show, we run into a lot of like, that didn't feel right. That, you know, something was weird about that. And we're all talking about Christianity, the gospel. We're trying to point people towards Christ, but you run into this all the time. And I'm sure you can sense it when you walk into a room, like I know it's here. I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
But that's hard for Christians to have that conversation, because someone in their church who goes every week could be, yo, stay away. Like, something's here with you, bro. You need to get help. But that's like a tough conversation to have.
Well, here's the challenge.
Yeah.
The gatekeepers of Christianity today are the Catholic gatekeepers. They have their own set of gatekeepers. Christianity in general has its gatekeepers. But if we talk about evangelicalism and the gatekeepers to those who believe in a born-again experience with Christ, 99% of them are horrified at everything I've just said. Horrified. I'm a heretic.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's look at this logically. How many demons have you ever tried to cast out? I don't. They're a Christian. They can't have a demon.
Yeah.
But I have those same Christians come to me and they say things like, well, I've cast demons out of priests, pastors, some of the major evangelical leaders in America whose names I could name, but I won't.
Well,
some of the most famous preachers in America, in the world, on the planet, have come to me privately. And I've said to my wife, I will go to my grave knowing the names of people I took through an exorcism, and the world will never know that they had demons.
Is that a humility thing? Like, if you encourage Christians, like right now, like if you have a chiropractor, you need to go to a chiropractor to get a back adjustment. It's not a sense of it's not that you don't have Christ. It's not because your back is messed up, but if there's a demon attacking you, you can have the humility to go ask for help. And these Christians don't want to ask for help, and that's part of the narrative.
Those who have come to me from the ecclesiastical realm have either come out of absolute necessity, or curiosity. One of them said to me, I used to watch you on YouTube just to make fun of you. And one night I found myself sitting alone with the cold barrel of a gun in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger. And I said, maybe this man can help me.
Wow.
They have to come to such a dramatic existential epiphany of terror in their minds before they will drop those walls and reach out. I don't care if the world ever knows who these people are. It doesn't matter. I've ministered to them as unto the Lord, and, God keeps track of that stuff. I don't have to. But the point is, they reach a point of extremity where the theological position that they've held, it's like, am I going to pull the trigger in this gun? Over theology? Or am I going to try to save the ministry that I have by doing something about this? And that's something God has to orchestrate. You can't logically convince someone that their prejudice is a lie. You can't do it. There has to be a life experience that shifts their thinking about what it is that they have denied. And it's the same with coming to Christ. For an atheist or an unbeliever, or somebody who's been lifted up to a UFO, I get those too. Oh yeah, I get a lot of people who have been abducted.
Yeah, we talked to him too.
I took on Whitley Strieber one time on Oprah. I don't know if you know that.
Wow. Does the demon want to kill the host, or like a parasite keep the host alive?
The demon that he had wanted to kill him. He had an expansive, thriving ministry.
Okay.
And the devil knew that if this man killed himself, on one hand, it would stop that ministry. On the other hand, if he killed him, it would beg the question of why such a great man of God would do something like that. So the devil was torn. He voted in favor of, let's just get rid of this guy. Yeah. And we stop all the good that he's doing.
These entities can debate.
Oh, yes.
And
exactly.
then the objectives will change based on the situation.
Yeah. They are the most intelligent beings in the universe.
Yeah.
Not omniscient, of course. But they are intelligent, and they figure these things out. There's something I call the matrix of evil. When you have a demon, you don't just have a demon. It's a matrix of evil. It's a spider's web of interconnected physical, mental, and emotional problems that come together in this one sense of a demon orchestrating it.
Wow. And my last question before we go in.
Your next last question.
Well, because you dropped that teaser at the end with debating on Oprah. What access do people give to get abducted by UFO, alien beings, or whatever that is? What do they do? Why does that happen to some people?
That's a very good question. And then the answer to that is easy. There's nothing wrong with speculating about what's going on with extraterrestrial phenomena. I've written a whole book about it. The problem is when these beings want to make, remember the movie Contact?
Yeah.
They want to make contact. And then people start having these, sometimes it starts as a dream, starts as an out-of-the-body experience, and then they meet this creature. And then the creature says, come with me. And they go with them into the craft or whatever it is they go into, and then the probes and the sexual stuff and the surgeries and all that stuff starts happening. But they give permission to the demons to materialize a physical phenomenon in themselves and in the ship and the whatever else they have to suck that person into the agreement they will now go into that other realm. Almost everybody who gets involved in having been alien abducted, if you check it out, there's a half a dozen or more other forms of the occult they're also involved in. This is just part of the template of this mystical view of reality, that what's here is not all that is, and we must go there to find it.
Yeah.
That's the bait.
Well, there's a generational legality into a lot of those stories too. Like their mom, their dad, they all have this family history. It seems as though certain bloodlines are getting tampered with, and other people are like super skeptical of like, that doesn't happen. And so those people will privately email us and say, I'm an abductee. It happens to me.
Yeah.
And then other people are like, your show's crazy. Aliens don't exist, blah, blah, blah. And they hate us for that reason. And then, so we're getting thank you letters and we're getting hate mail. That's where we are. And
well, it's fine. Discuss it.
Yeah.
Analyze it. Look at it. Let people tell their stories.
Yeah.
It just, people have to listen carefully to the story to read between the lines to see if there isn't some other esotericism involved there somewhere.
Sure.
Where they have, whether they've been, I don't know, reading A Course in Miracles or whatever, and so their thinking has been changed from a Judeo-Christian viewpoint to that of alternative reality. Wow.
Bob, thank you so much.
Bob.
Thank you for coming in.
This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys having me. And I want to say to Lindsay.
Yeah.
Lindsay is the lady who said to me, I love these guys. I'm a fan. I never miss a show. I want you to be in their show. I'm going to contact them right away.
She did.
And here we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah. And Bob, for folks that want to, you're everywhere online, but they want to find out and get involved, or look into your ministries, finding your books, where would they find your stuff?
Really simple. BobLarson.org.
Awesome.
BobLarson.org. And you will find opportunities for personal or virtual ministry. All of the books which we've written, as well as Bob Larson University. And we also, in addition to the personal ministry I do, we have deliverance teams all over the world, and we have highly trained associate ministers who follow the practices you've heard me here today talk about. And so we want to help people. We make these services available. They need to avail themselves.
I like it. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. We've heard a lot of things, and sometimes we have more questions than answers, and we just keep asking the questions and trying to help people piece it together. So appreciate you coming on our show. And stick around for the after show. We're going to hop right into that. Thank you.
Your financial support and prayers make it possible for us to bring hope for the hurting and freedom to those in spiritual bondage. For the latest information regarding ministry outreaches, go to boblarson.org or call 303-980-1511.